So actually, thank you for coordinating this event. Special thanks to APSSDC. It's a honor for me to be part of this lecture and share some of my experience and knowledge with these students interested to learn this. So today's topic is the significance of data to the enterprise, right? So that's what I do on a day-to-day job. I'm a data and analytics architect currently working for this company called Great Lakes Cheese. So what it does is like it's a manufacturing company. We make cheese. We make cheese and we package cheese and then sell it to the retail stores, right? So and then I support their business, providing data as the business needs, and that can help take their decisions on the day-to-day job, right? So I support all the business folks in different domains, like from sales, procurement, demand planners, and all of these different departments in the organization. I support them with providing some information for them. So previously also I worked in a similar field of BI analyst, senior BI analyst for applied industrial technologies for 4 to 5 years. And then currently I'm working in the company as an analytics architect for last 2 years, right? So basically my background in the education is bachelor's in technology. I came from Sri Vidyaniketan Engineering College in Tirupati, passed out in 2005. And currently pursuing opportunities for data science in masters in US. Hopefully I'll get admission this year or next. So I'm waiting for the right college admission. So that's my educational background. I'm also a certified SAP professional. I have about 15 years of experience so far, and I've been consult previous to this full-time jobs in US. I've worked in India for few companies. Like started in Satyam, moved on to Accenture and PricewaterhouseCoopers. So my previous colleague from PwC has given me this opportunity to share my knowledge to you guys. So that's how I'm here. So firstly, thank you for the organizing team to give me this opportunity. So I'm really amazed and overwhelmed when Manasa was saying there are some 800 registrants.
Sir, your screen is not.
Not shared yet. Okay, 1 second again. How about now?
Yes, sir, it is visible now.
Okay. So you see my introduction page, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So really, I'm amazed and overwhelmed with the response when Mansa was saying they have about 800 plus registrants. I never dealt or shared my knowledge to this big of a group in the past. So thank you for all those registering to this topic, and hope I'll meet to the expectations from the audience in the next 1.5 hours or 2 hours of this session, right? So as I was working in the current organization is a cheese manufacturing company, I thought I'll share a small video with you on how we make the cheese. That video is very essential because I will touch upon a lot of topics, the way how we make the cheese, and where all the data is being generated and how we can use that as a improving our business model, right? So I would like to share this video here. 1 second, I'll play this video. I'll connect again after 4 minutes. Watch this video for me, please. You see this video, right?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Yes, I'm back. So, I think you would have seen many of these videos on YouTube or elsewhere. The main reason why I'm showing this video to you all is because if you have noticed the video, there are a lot of processes that goes into each day to make to make a cheese, right? So I see there are very few participants on the airmaid, but if you have any question or if you want to talk in the meeting, Manasa and Murali, please don't hesitate to give them opportunity to ask me questions on that, right? Thank you for that. So the thing is, if you see that video, there are a lot of process. So each processes is very important for the business, right? So they have to adhere to a lot of rules defined by the food and safety department, right? So if you've seen that there is a grader who tested a piece of cheese and then tries to eat and smell. So his role is grader, right? So this guy, all his duty every day is like there are blocks of cheese that comes out of production every day, and his role is to test the cheese. Isn't it so good? Somebody who likes the cheese so much, they're allowed to do that, right? So their role is to identify which one is a good quality. There's a manual inspection. There is no machinery that does the inspection, right? There's only man can do the test of the cheese. So that has every piece of this process has a lot of data that's coming out of it, right? So we'll come to that. I'll cover some of these aspects of this cheese making and some process and where data is produced. We'll talk about that, right? So moving on further, let's get started with the subject, right? So before we get into the topic, I would like to have you guys listen to a conversation. I just borrowed my wife's time here for a couple minutes to do this conversation between two people. So this conversation is between a customer and a pizza order person, right? So so here is how it goes, the conversation. So it's very important to hear this conversation. We'll touch upon some of these topic points in the session. Yeah. So here you go.
Hello, is this Domino's Pizza?
No, ma'am. It's a Google's pizza.
So it's a wrong number.
No, ma'am. Google just bought the store and we named it as Google's Pizza.
Okay, take my order, please.
Well, ma'am, you want the usual pizza?
The usual? You know me?
Oh, yeah. According to your caller ID, it's in the past 12 times you ordered from us. It's like more like cheese pizza with a thick crust on it.
Okay, this is it.
May I suggest to you this time a vegetable pizza?
No, I hate vegetables.
But ma'am, your cholesterol is not good at all.
How do you know?
Through the subscribers guide we have the result of your blood test for the last 7 years.
Okay, but I do not want this pizza. I already take medicine.
You have not taken the medicine regularly, ma'am. 4 months ago, you purchased only one box of tablets, which has 30 of them in our drugstore.
I bought more from another drugstore
It doesn't show up on your credit card, ma'am.
and paid in cash.
But you did not withdraw that much cash according to our bank statement.
I have other sources of cash.
But this is not showing as per your last tax form unless you have got some undeclared income source.
What the hell? Enough. I'm sick of Google, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp. I'm going to an island without internet where there is no cell phone line and no one to spy on me.
Well, I understand, ma'am, but you do not have your passport available ready. It has expired 5 weeks ago. That there ends the conversation. Thank you. I'll touch base with you again. So what this conversation will tell us is uh, any customer who has talked to a pizza guy and gets to hear this much of information about her, right? They will definitely not buy the pizza from the same store again, right? Because they know they are tracking a lot of their information everywhere possible. And then a lot of information they are buying from different sources, from the subscribers, from the data collection agencies and stuff like that, everywhere possible, right? And this is all like unnecessary information for a pizza guy. But but it is that's how they are doing it. So there is a lot of irrelevant data within an organization, and we have to deal with that information. So as a data architect, so we'll touch base upon some of those discussion aspects also in the subject, right? So you saw two things now. One, the video of how we make the cheese, and what are the different process that is involved into a making of a cheese. And the second thing is the conversation between a customer and a sales rep, and what extra information the sales rep has on the customer, which is relevant or irrelevant. We'll talk about that data also in the coming session. Yeah. So this is a video we just watched, right? So at the end of the cheese at making, so they will pile this cheese like this. If you see my screen, uh, I'm doubting, like, are you? I hear no voice at all. There is my voice and my screen share is all clear, Manasa.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, thank you. So the cheese that is made, it's all piled up like this. Just imagine this is one aisle of storage space, and how much of storage space we have is about 100,000 square feet of storage space we have just for storing the cheese in the manufacturing company that I work for, right? So imagine the scope of the cheese manufacturing in the world, right? So if I'll just tell some few facts about the cheese that will create an excitement on understanding the process and how much of business involved into this area, right? So one pound of cheese to make it takes about 10 pounds of milk. So when you churn, if you see the machines that is churning the milk, so if you make the 10 pounds of milk into the it's called silos, they call. So when you put this 10 pounds of milk into a silo, it produces 1 pound of cheese on the production line, right? So that's how the whole process, I'll talk about it. So there are more than 2,000 varieties of cheeses. So each ingredient that goes into this combination of making, it makes up a different variety of cheese, right? And then the more the age of the cheese, it's expensive it is. Like if you store the cheese for 12 months and then you call it as aged cheese, and then it's more expensive, right? So that's why you pay for a lot of inventory costs associated to it. You carry that cheese for so long in some place, and then the cost of the making plus the cost of carrying adds up, and then it increases the price of the cheese, right? So Pizza Hut is the largest retail fast food giant chain that uses this cheese a lot. 300 million pounds of cheese annually. That's a lot, right? So 300 million pounds. As a country, like US produces the most cheese in the world. I'm sure, like in India, I've never eaten a cheese until I finished my graduation. I never ate a cheese. We are more towards the dairy products, but not the cheese. We never eat the cheese. Most of us, I guess. But after starting with this company, I really learned a lot about cheese, and I've tasted a lot of cheeses. Like there are like 20 years, 30-year old cheese, which is so expensive. One bite of cheese may cost like $5 or $6, something like that. So there are a lot high expensive cheeses, like the same as wine, high expensive wine versus the low cost everyday making wine. There's a lot difference on that. And mozzarella is my favorite. Somebody like pepper jack. So there are huge list of cheeses, and mozzarella is the highest selling cheese, and followed by cheddar, if you have heard these names before. Okay. So now coming to the topic, the significance of data to an enterprise, right? So it's an interesting topic. The subject is very vast. The subject is very vast. I'll try to cover as much as I can. And just to set the expectation, I'm not a formal professional trainer on this subject, because just this is my day-to-day job. Forgive me for any disorganized subject that I teach, but I'll try to cover what I have in my mind. Yeah. But I want you guys open up and speak sometimes, because it's quite I don't like to just speak myself. It's a long session, at least 1 hour 15 minutes. I will not stop, but I will try to answer your questions. If you have any questions, feel free to provide this in the chat. Let me check if you have any questions already in the chat. Okay, I don't see any questions. Good. Okay, so With this topic, you need to understand first what is an enterprise, right? So, if you ask any architect in the company what is an enterprise, you get many different answers. Sometimes they're very confusing. They contradict to each other. I say a statement, somebody else make a different statement for enterprise. They contradict. Sometimes they're wrong, sometimes they're fuzzy, vague, and all that, right? But you will hear to one another definition from this session from me, and it will be one of the another 1,000 definitions you see online in the web, right? But this is my perspective of taking this as an enterprise, right? So what comes to my mind when you say it's an enterprise is a business, right? I have not made a lot of press slide presentations, but it's more of talking because I don't have a ready-made slides to share. But no, that's why I asked. Please talk to me when you're hearing something different. So when the first thing I get in mind is a business, right? How the business is built, right? It has a lot of entities attached to each business, right? Some of these entities are like people is an entity, right? The process, the cheese making process that you saw in the video, those are all the entities. The technology that you use to support this process is also an entity, right? What capabilities you have in the company, what raw material you use, and how much money you have, like what are the other things that contribute to the make of the product, right? Which we sell to the customer. That's all things relevant inside the organization is all called internal entities of the company, right? There are also like entities like external entities, like partners who we work with, like there are suppliers of the cheese, right? Suppliers of the milk, the government who defines the rules and definitions of how the product should be, right? So all these entities also are external entities. I would say some of the examples, right? Let's say I have my son who wants to play soccer this evening, and I have the meeting with investors of my company also, and then I have a clash with the soccer game and investors my meeting, and I lose the investors meeting. But indirectly, my son is also an entity, external entity, which is acting on the enterprise operations, right? My operation is to work with the investors to get some funding, but I could not attend that meeting because of my son's soccer game. Then my son becomes an unknown entity that acts on my company's operations. So that's also an entity. So some of these outside entities, like they call as black box entities, right? So what the black box means is you really don't know what their processes are. But as long as they are helping your organization, they're all called good entities, right? So sometimes the black box entities are good. Sometimes these black box entities are wrong, right? Let's say you are a textile company and then you are expecting to get a cloth from India or from Bangladesh or from Pakistan, because many of the textile exports are from these countries I mentioned. So, and something happened in the production side of the plant for the cloth, and then fire happened or something happened, and then the company in America doesn't get the product on the time. They miss the deadline in providing the product to the customers. So it has a lot of implications on the supply chain, right? So what's the supply chain is like, from the time the product is received to the product is received to the customer, every process in between this is a supply chain, right? So there is a disruption of supply chain without your knowledge, which is from the external entity. That's called a wrong, that's a bad black box. But you still don't control those black boxes outside your organization, because it doesn't add a lot of value to your company. Because let's say if you have to start producing the milk for the cheese company, right? You have to end up opening a altogether different business to provide the milk for your own, right? And it's impossible. For example, right, we procure milk from like 70 different milk companies, right? They have thousands of jerseys in their farms, and then their prime business is just to produce the milk, right? So we have to depend on external entities in many cases to achieve what you want to achieve in your organizational goal, right? So there are both good and bad entities. So I'll tell you another example of what an entity could be, right? So let's say there are a group of people fighting for a common cause, right, against some company in the street that is polluting your lake in the city, right? So even you can call that group of people fighting for a common cause, you can still call them as a company, because they also have entities. They use their skills, they use their circle of friends, their influence and all that. These are all the entities for that people. They're in different part of the city, but they all work together to fight against this company which is polluting a clear water in the lake, in the city that you're living, right? So you can also call that as a company. Let's say a person wants to rob a family, and then he uses his skills and tools to rob the house, and maybe he uses the Facebook to follow the person, how he is behaving, what's his family background and all that, or he uses Google to how to escape from the house, to plot the structure around the house and all that. So these are all the external entities that the robber uses, it like Facebook and Google, and his skills and tools are internal entities of himself, and then they use all these internal and external entities to rob that house. So that's the goal of that person, right? So 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 with that examples, this is how I make the definition here, right? So then enterprise is a conceptual organization of people and entities, right, which interact with one another at certain times and certain places with the intent of accomplishing a common goal. So that's an enterprise to me. So the examples that I added is the person who's trying to rob, or a group of people trying to work against a company which is polluting it. So you can relate it what an enterprise is now, with both the internal entities and external entities all together acting together to work for a common goal. So in the cheese company side, we use raw materials as milk, and there are different ingredients that goes into making of the cheese. All this suppliers becomes our entities, and we also work with government to follow the food and drug rules that is set by the government. And we do use a lot of transportation help from other companies, and then we all use this internal support, like finance, sales, marketing, every other department within the company, to produce one right product that the customer is looking for. So that's an enterprise. So it's a group of entities working together at one point of time to accomplish a common goal. Yeah. So I forgot to put this agenda up front for this day. We'll talk what is an enterprise, which is already over. What is the data, right, and how it's evolved over the days. What is an enterprise architecture, and then we'll talk about data architecture a bit. What is there is a lot more to the data. Aspects of data, we'll talk about that. And the important topic for today is the real life examples where data can be a great solution for the companies. And then I'll little touch base upon what is a database, data warehouse, what is a mart, what is a lake, and all that. And then we'll conclude it. Maybe I'll take next 30 minutes uninterrupted, and then we'll do a round of question and answers. And 30 minutes, and then we'll do another set of round question and answers. Yeah. Okay. So now you know what is an enterprise, right? We'll see what is the data, right? So then we'll talk about how these two together help a business, right? So data, some people call it as data, some people call it as data in Europe. So whatever you call, wherever you are, right, it's all everyone knows about it, right? So it exists everywhere. But what is data, right? At its core, data is more like information, right? There has been explosion of data in the last decade, in the past 1 decade or two, especially with the growth of web usage and the growth of mobile devices. Everyone has 1 or 2 devices at home, and this Internet of Things, the sensors producing lots of information, right? The Facebook, the media, social media is another thing that causing a lot of information, right? So with all this said, the data management and quality assurance has become a priority for the business, right? So that's a prime focus on all these management companies. The data management, how is it managed, and how is the quality of the data, right? 100 people talk about 100 different things, but what is the real news? What is the fake news? How do you justify that, right? What is that? How do you manage that source of information that you have already, right? So we all know we can do definitely a better informed decisions and better decisions for the company if you have more and more information. But how? We don't know that, right? Concept of this data available for these companies is there since the beginning of the time, right? Back in the days, for example, when we were kids, we go to some store and ask if, how do you manage the store as a store manager? He would say, I list down all my things that I sold yesterday and day before and another before day, and then I will look back my page, what is sold in the last 1 month or last 1 year, and then I will buy those same products for the next year, right? So that's his own information. That's the data for him, right? But as we fast forward it today, right? The current day store manager decisions are based on different things, like how many products are being scanned at this register, right? What is the point of sale giving us the information? There are a lot of point of sales. Like if you go to the Reliance store in the current days market, right? You have like 10 or 20 different registers. There are a lot of products being scanned, and there is a backend database that records all of this, and that store manager have access to see what product categories have been selling more, what brand is selling more, right? How much of value or volume they are able to sell every day. And then the store manager makes his decisions on how much of stock we need to get in more and things like. So if you see the way the olden days the store manager worked and the way the current day store manager work is a way different. They both have the same information, but how they access it and how much more the information they have is uncomparable, right? So online, let's say if you have, you're going to online websites, right? So you go to this website and they also track your digital footprint, like which location, which device you're using. So they make their products that are compatible for your location. Like if you're in a winter areas, if you're in cold areas, like they try to sell the jackets and thick weather dresses, right? But if you're coming from the summer side, they try to post ads based on where the location is, like what kind of a device are you using based on that. So having said that, so this is the data. We'll talk about a little bit of data here, right? So I with my knowledge on the data in the last few years, so I would say there are 4 levels of usage of the data, right? So the first stage is how you collect all this information. As I said in the past, you have lots of, let's say if you take a retail store, you collect all of this and then you organize it somewhere in the backend as in a database, right? So that's all the data. So when you analyze this data, it becomes the information for you. That is a second step, right? You analyze this information, that's the information. And then you summarize it. Like you have 100 transactions of buying Maggi noodles in the retail store, but you summarize it as a one line, like on this day you sold like 100 of them, right? So that's a summarization. So that's the information for the storekeeper. If he has 100 lines of selling each packet for each person, he cannot run through a lot of them, right? So he has to summarize it. That becomes information for the retail store. And then after getting used to that information, he can identify a patterns, right? And then be able to help his decisions based on the information that he got. So then it becomes a knowledge. So what products he has to buy further, where which other areas he has to expand his business into, right? So that's the knowledge he gains based on the information that is provided by the data, right? And then the final step is the wisdom, right? So when you are able to have this much of knowledge and information with you, you can do right decisions, right? That can help your business grow further. That's how every company is working towards it. So when companies have migrated this from data to wisdom, right, now they can make decisions on what business we should be in or what business we should not be in, and which important, which is not, right? And all that. The concept of this data has been existing for years, right? but the impact of it is been greater than any time before in the recent days. So though the data concept has been available back in days, the old storekeeper versus the new storekeeper, the impact of it is very, very high now. Because back in the days, if you have to expand a small business, it takes years to expand, right? Because they don't have a visibility of an overall picture of their business at a bird's eye view, right? They don't have that. But now, why the business are expanding so fast is because they have access to all this data in the form of information, knowledge, and wisdom. So they make the right decisions to move forward. So that clearly shows that data is helping them to grow faster, right? So that's my 2 cents on that. So let's talk about how this data is evolved a little bit more on this, right? So back in the days, right? If you see this chart below, right? Up the x-axis and y-axis, your competitive advantage of running the business successfully is increasing, right? So if you see this, like you are able to define what should happen. You are able to define what can make it happen, right? Based on all the data, you can do a self-healing and autonomous driving cars, or like self-driving cars also based on the predictions that your data is providing you. So if you go up and y-axis, your advantage is getting increasing, but wherever your process land on this chart of this process, they're intended to support the business growth, right? So let's say if you fall here, it means you're not backwards, you're still helping your business to able why it's happening, to understand. So based on the maturity of the company and where you fall in this level of chart, you are still helping, right? So what is a descriptive analytics, right? So descriptive is more like from the previous screen I was showing. So it's more like descriptive is like in this stage, like data. You're just collecting the information and you are able to see what has happened in that descriptive analytics, right? So in the past, you just use the past information, and then in the diagnostic side, you are able to study the present based on the past data, right? So why it's happening, and then will trends continue based on the past data, right? And then you can do some kind of analysis on this descriptive analysis, right? So the descriptive is more like databases with a lot of data in it, right? And then you are able to do some summarization using queries, and you provide some hierarchies and study the data by hierarchies. So that's all you do it in diagnostic analytics, right? But you are able to study what is happening now in your business. That's what is helping it. So the predictive, the degree of intelligence, this thing is how you are able to predict it based on your past and your current analytics. You're able to do some kind of a predictive analytics to it, right? So in this stage, you are able to do some forecasting. You can do some kind of a predictive modeling. You are able to tell your business what can happen and what trends will continue to happen, which products will make you successful, which products will not make you product successful. Based on the historical sales or historical production, they will be able to do the predictive, right? So the prescriptive analytics is something little beyond the predictive, right? So you are able to only suggest them, right? But prescriptive is something you are able to have a concrete evidence that, based on the training the models, right? So what it happens is prescriptive, you are able to more the predictions become accurate. You can define the models that is defining the best optimal behavior of the product, right? Like let's say if you predicted like you can sell like 1,000 cars in the next month, right? But let's say if that becomes true, right? And then you can define a model and you can set a sales goal for all of your managers, sales car managers, right, to sell 1,000 plus in the next month, because the prediction became true. And then you can set some prescriptive definition goals for your department to achieve that, because there is a more probability of getting that, because you have already proven that the prediction is true. You see that? So and now now we are entering into the world of cognitive analytics, right? So what is this cognitive analytics? So this is more of how do I say that? So one second here. So the cognitive analytics is more of when you are able to consistently meet the predictions and prescriptions of that is provided by the data, you are able to apply that automatically, right? Let's say if your predictions are accurate, you can put that applicable logic by doing this kind of if you have heard these words, artificial intelligence or machine learning or deep learning things. So based on the repetition of the information, the model learns itself and be able to tell this is how it has to react to this model. When this happens, you have to react in this model. So it's like more self-healing. Let's say, how is this Tesla or this autonomous car makers who are doing this self-driving thing is all based on the cognitive analytics, because when they see the stop sign, how does that look? So they have different scenarios where the stop sign symbols are, and then when the sensor sense that thing that is being trained, the model, then it knows that it has to stop. Let's say there's a moving object. They train the model for 100 different things. They train with a bike, they train with a cycle, they train with a kid running into the road. So there are hundreds of scenarios in different backgrounds, like in the hilly background, in the mountain background, in the forest background. They train these models so that the model learns every aspect of thing and then be able to do a self decision. So we cannot go to the cognitive analytics more directly, but there are a lot of these things you see on the bottom. If you're anywhere in the chart, it doesn't really matter much as long as you're able to help your company. But all of these four phases help to come to the stage of cognitive analytics. So that's the end goal of all the companies. So let's say in our cheese manufacturing company, if you've seen, there are a lot of people working on that each line to make this cheese, right? So they want to make this as much as autonomous by itself. So they want to do a self decision when to stop the machines, when is the right temperatures for the milk to get pastured, right? Something like that. So they have to do this repetitive analysis of this descriptive analytics, then move on to the predictive and then prescriptive, and then only they'll be able to move on to the cognitive analytics, right? So that's how we have evolved over the days. Then the next topic I would like to see is the architecture, right? So now all these businesses are getting very complex, right? So your company has to transform, as I said in the past, it has to transform. Every company has to work through this transformation, right? Otherwise it becomes hard for them to thrive, right? So if you're always looking backward what you sold and you're only doing some mind math to look into how we grow further versus how people are buying based on the summarized reports or how they are working on the predictive reports, they cannot get into new businesses, or they will most likely they lose the customers because there are other vendors or providers who are doing better in that area. So it takes very less time to fall under the covers. So it's always necessary for these companies to transform itself in the future, right? So I'll tell you a little bit of the example that we worked in the recent days, right? So if I compare it with the technology side, let us say you build a chat bot. Let's say you build some chat room for your colleagues, right? So this chat room, over time the requirements have changed, and then your software will not be able to adapt, and users will be frustrated of that, right? So let's say if your chat room is not working as expected, right? You don't like it. So back in those days when we were using these Yahoo messengers, right? They were never updated to how you see the updates on the Facebook or on the WhatsApp, right? So nobody likes that chat room anymore. If I remember, I am from 99 batch of 10th standard. So back in those days we didn't had this, but when it came this Yahoo Messenger, We were so excited, the chat rooms that we used to go and talk to people across different countries. But now it's no more fun. We get frustrated if I log into that. I'm never logged in a while, but I'm sure if you log in now, you don't like it because it's not as good as the other competitors does it, right? So the users are left frustrated, and then you try to keep adding these new features, but since the architecture behind it is weak, it becomes a patchwork, right? It becomes a patchwork, and you end up spending a lot of money and time just to maintain it. So rather you scrap it, right? So many of these big companies, like all legacy companies, right? Legacy in the sense like grandfathered companies, like came from 100 years ago. All of this have got a lot of applications built from back in those days, and then they're all suffering the same thing, right? They're all facing the same problem. So that's why I think for any company, the architecture is very important. So that architecture should be able to scale up or adapt to the changes, or be able to accommodate these changing requests from the businesses, right? So what do you do to keep this business sustaining, right? So you have to keep this business running. I'll tell you why we need this kind of architecture to navigate through these complexities, right? So you don't know how complex it is, but your architecture should be ready uh, to be able to absorb those ever-changing requirements, right? So uh, I was telling you there are a lot of process that involved in the company, like the products, the data, the people, the technology. All these are different entities. You should learn how these entities work together, right? To work towards the goal of this our enterprise goal, right? So you should learn that, and some frameworks around this architecture will help you understand how these all work together, right? So I'll tell you a little bit of how you do this on this architecture, right? So if for any IT department in the company, right, I'm not talking about the consulting firms like Accenture or TCS or anyone like that, but if you think of a business perspective, every company needs these four architectures, right? One is the business architecture, the second one is applications architecture, there's a data architecture, and there is an infrastructure architecture, right? So what this business architecture is, there are so many processes that involved in making of a cheese, as I showed you in the businesses, right? So you have to document and capture all these business process, how they operate, right? And define goals of each person role in their line, right? What this person has to do, right? Like let's say if you do back in the days, there is this pit stop for these formula race cars, right? So back in the days, it used to take almost 20 to 30 seconds to change the tires and things like that in the pit stop. But now the fastest the pit stop changeover happens in less than 2 seconds, right? How? Because everyone is defined their own roles, right? So and then they have to do their own job, so they don't really have. So there are two things, right? One is like how you work cooperate. I mean, I don't know that, I don't recall those terms, but how you coordinate with your team versus how to focus on your own roles is a two different things, right? Nowadays the jobs are more like focusing on your one role, right? So that's how the speed and the accuracy of that role improves every day. So you have to architect a role or architect a person's responsibility, or architect a process to better define its process every day, right? So if you always if you have 100 things to do on the same day, you never improve your performance or never improve your the way you do it, and then it becomes harder to manage at a large scale. Let's say if you have 5,000 people in your business, right? And then you have to define their own roles and responsibilities, otherwise it will be chaos in the production plant, right? So that's why business architecture is very crucial. So where you document the process, where you document the roles and responsibilities, and what products you need to make. So if you don't know what product to make, you'll end up thinking too many things, and the business will never move forward, right? So all this comes in the business architecture, which we don't talk about it much here. But then comes to the applications manager, applications architecture, right? So what this architecture is, we use a lot of software solutions that will help business to do their job, right? And then the prime goal of this architecture from the application side is to adapt to the change in the business, right? We have to adapt because there could be a lot of environmental changes, right? There could be a lot of government rules that changes, right? So we have to be able to ready to absorb those ever changing complexities into our application side, right? If you don't support that, the business cannot grow further. So that's why you have to decide what application best suits to your organization's growth, right? So that's like more like applications architecture, right? And the third thing is the data architecture, right? All these applications generate data. All this process from this business architecture generates data in the form of like files or forms or PDFs or any other thing, like the process, the sensors, IoT of information, because all this machineries generates thousands of millions of records. So our company is close to a petabyte of data. We have storage up to a petabyte. So that's a huge you would have seen like 1 TB, 5 TB, 10 TB hard disks max, right, in our day-to-day use, but you're talking about 1 petabyte of data, which is like 1 TB is 1 terabyte, and then you go to 1,000 times of TB, you get the petabyte, right? So that's a huge data. I never could fill up my 2 TB hard disk I have for last 4 or 5 years. I've not been able to fill all the personal information now. It's a huge data, right? It has a lot of data, and also it keeps adding up more, right? Like let's say like you heard the conversation on the pizza side. There are a lot of unwanted information about the customer for a pizza guy to deliver, but they still have it, right? Like the customer interactions, like the preferences of what kind of pizza they want, or what is that email communications they had between the customers and the business, right? And how much price we sold for them in the past, what is that, like there is so much stuff to record and store somewhere, and you need better way to manage all this data, right? Which is probably like get stored in different formats, right? As I said, we have the conversations from the phone, right? Conversations from the emails, conversations from the promotions, from the historical sales, right? How you model all this data for easy access in the future, all these different formats, maintaining the quality and also the security of this data, because all this information is proprietary for that one customer, one company, right? One enterprise. So it's very confidential. At the same time, it's very complex to manage and secure it, right? So you need definitely a great architecture for that, right? And finally, the infrastructure architecture, right? So these physical machines like wires, routers, and storages, right, that all supports this underlying infrastructure, right, ultimately needed for all these applications and data to run their business, right? So all these architectures is very crucial, and then we'll focus a little bit more on the data architecture here, right? And what matters the most, right? So I'll tell you an example here, right? So let's say there is a person, no, let's take a stop here and see if we have any questions coming up here. I'll stop share. Where is it? Here. Okay, I have no questions. So would you guys on the live here, would you respond? How are you liking it? Do you want me to change the tone of it, or you want me to add more examples, or what kind of feedback you have so far on this session? It's very quiet. I would like to hear from you guys. I would wait for a minute. It's all okay. It'll be shared at the end of sessions. Just having a sip of water here. It's too much of talking that I'm doing. It's been a while I spoke this much of the time. I know this information that I'm giving is all very general. So it's hard to understand a little bit, I guess, because it's nothing visual. Like if you have, this is not a technology training. It's more of understanding how a business runs in the background and things like that, right? How we add value to this business by with the help of the data that we have, right? So I think we passed half of the session. Okay, I'll move on then.
Sir, there is a comment.
What is that? Your teaching is excellent. Show some
About
analysts use data to provide managers. Analysts use data to provide managers with insights into how projects should be run to provide optimal results. Yes, analysts use data to provide managers. Yes. Yeah. So, is that a question or? Yes, analysts use. So how this work in our nation is like, every department have their own analysts, right? So it's hard to, as a data architect or a data person, data geek, it's hard to understand every process of the company, right? So you work with these analysts inside of their department, and then you provide them the information that they need, and they know how to analyze better, right? So you wouldn't know, let's say there's a market price for the cheese, right? How much you pay, it's not a data person's role, right? But what's the best price for the cheese in the market is decided by the analysts in the cheese procurement side, right? So because their job is to negotiate the price from the different cheese producers, right? They work day in and day out with these vendors of the cheese to identify the best price. But as a data analyst, you cannot tell, okay, based on this last month sales, you can buy at this price, because there are a lot many external factors that, because let's say for the recent days there is a COVID thing, the whole supply chain stopped, right? Nobody produced cheese, right? But there is a limited cheese in the market, and you have to pay more, and your algorithms or your data will never show that, okay, because you are only buying at $2 a pound, but now this you have to pay like $4 a pound to buy the same cheese, right? Because the amount of being produced is less, right? So something like that. That kind of information is only available for those department specific analysts, right? So can we think it as a data analytics part of, can we think as data analytics part of data science? Yeah. So data science is the end goal, right? So but the for my CEO, even if I tell we would probably lose a customer because of this sales trend, he would consider that as a data science, right? So it's up to the level of usage of the data. But for some people, data science is too complex for a medical research thing, right? What components goes into the medicine? How is it reacting to the, if you do neural networks, artificial intelligence, all of this goes into it for a data science for a medical field. But based on your company, right, what is your goal? Whether if as long as you are able to sustain your information to your business decisions, that's a data science for that company. So on the back end, it's just a data and how you model it. As I was telling you, the 4 evolutions of the thing, when you get into that augmented or cognitive analytics, that's a far off where you can drive your decisions in automation fashion, right? That all the evolution of all this data becomes as a part of data science for each company at different level. Hope it answers your question, Mangal Singh. Yep. So let's move on to the topic. I'll get back to these questions. probably at the end of this, right? I'll share my screen again. So what matters the most, right? So I have an example for this, right? Let's say there is a guy, his goal is to do a weight loss, okay? So he decides to go hit the gym, and then he does this gym for every day 2 hours, right? And then end of the day, he's so tired and he eats a lot, so to fill his appetite because he deserves it. He finished his like 2 hours gym, and then he continues for a month and a month and a month, and then he sees no result, right? He only sees like his goal is to reduce like 20 pounds, but he only reduced it like 4 or 5 pounds. So the goal of this person for this enterprise is to reduce weight, right? But it's not being accomplished because there are two factors to this goal, at accomplishing this goal, right? One is eat well, eat right, and then do your part in the physical activities, right? So then only you do this weight loss program accurate. But if you're not following this diet program, you will never accomplish what you want, right? In this case, the right factor he did not focus is eating well. When he changed his pattern of eating well and reducing the gym, but still he loses his weight as is expected. So the based on the goal, what factors are crucial to arrive at that goal is very important. So always finding the right thing, uh, that matters the most is crucial, right? So there can be many factors, right? So for example, in the company, it can affect in many ways in many for the system, right? And it's important to identify them and focus our energy on that top few things that matters the most for the organization, right? In an organization or a project, it is if it's not going in a right direction as per the expectation, I think it's a time to look at the factors again, and that affects the outcome, and direct your energies into that crucial critical ones of that factors, right? So for example, right, you have people in the company, you have processes in the company, you have machines in the company, right? So some managements focus on re-engineering the machines, right? So the re-engineering the machines may yield different goals. Re-engineering the process where they are wasting time, where the more people, where there are less people, identifying that in the processes helps them to improve the process efficiencies, right? And if you focus on the people mindset, how the culture is in the company, how the now let's say there are like many of the American companies, these employees I work with, they are all in the middle-aged people. They have been in the companies for many years, right? So if they are not worrying about the company's people's well-being and people's skills up to getting up to date, uh, how much ever you change the process or how much ever you change the machines, they don't really help them to achieve the goals, right? So you have to take care of the people. Maintaining their well-being and maintaining their skills also helps this process to change. So identifying right factors that contributing to the right goals of the organization is very crucial. So in many cases, data will help them to identify that right factor. So I would say this is one of the prime reason why data is essential, right? How do you identify the process where there are defects in it, right? Every process generates the data, and then you have to study the data to identify the gaps in the process, right? That's how you improve those processes. So everywhere you have this data, and that's very crucial, right? So let's talk a little bit more on the data, right? So I thought like these are the four important aspects that I think you need to understand as a data engineer or data architect, right? So I would cover on each of this topic a little bit, and then try to fit in this in next 1 hour, right? So accuracy. How is accuracy and quality important for the businesses, right? I have an example. I go to work like 4 days to one plant, and I rarely go to another plant like once in a month or so, right? So when I go to this far off plant where I had some meeting for that day, and while I start back from that distant office to my home, I get an alert on my phone saying that you have 20 minutes or 30 minutes drive to your home automatically, right? I didn't feed my information in my Google Maps or like Apple Maps anywhere. I didn't feed, but I still get an alert saying it takes 20 minutes to go to your home. How does it know, right? How does it know? If the let's say if the data is not accurate for that, right? If it shows the wrong direction to my home, it may take 30 minutes to reach instead of 20 minutes. So that 10 minutes is it could be a most valuable for someone in need, right? Let's say if you're driving to a medical hospital, right, for a medical emergency, so this 10 minutes make a huge difference because they have to rely on this data based on how accurate your data is, right? And you may high chances of losing a customer. Let's say if Google Maps is always showing you wrong maps, do you think everyone uses it? No, right? So the automation of these things is at the next level in the Google and Facebook companies like this, because they have gone through this information again and again and again and made these models as appropriate as possible and as optimal as possible to make these automated messages and flashes on your system try like slowly, like in the last few years this has been started, and now they are constantly able to push these notifications that how much time it takes and where are you going, what are the best things to do in that place, and all that stuff they are able to provide because they have proven that their data accuracy is true based on their models what they are showing up, right? So it could be someone's, like, let's say if somebody's medical reports have come into their flash that your heartbeat is pumping up too high. If somebody is using these smart watches these days, it shows your heartbeat is so high, right? So it should be accurate to flash up. Somebody needs a lot of guts, take that stake and stand in front of person and say this information is correct. It's not that easy to come to that stage, right? So you may put that person's health into jeopardy, having that wrong information, or somebody may sue you, having you showing them, it's a wrong information that showed I depended on that and it caused me this problem. So there are high risk of the companies itself, right? They are putting their whole company at stake to show you this accuracy, right? So that's how important the accuracy and the quality of the import data is, right? For this point, right? So next is the characteristics of the data, right? So there are six V's in the industry standard, right? So these are the 6 V's: the volume, the velocity, the variety of data, the veracity of data, validity of data, and volatility of the data, right? So I'll explain a bit of each of this statement, right? So the volume of data, right? It's a huge volume. As I said in the past, like 1 hour, the data volume is huge, right? The storages are increasing to terabytes, petabytes. Some companies like Google and Facebook, they have exabytes of data. It's like 1,000 times more than peta and is zeta, and 1,000 times more than zeta is exa. So imagine how much of volume is that of data that they are storing it. You post a lot of information into the Facebook or Google or everywhere, right? Everyone in the world uses this. So that's the amount of information. And then how fast it retrieves back on your screen, right? Like what you posted in last year, it retrieves so fast, right? So imagine how the data is organized in the back end to pull up that right information. I hear someone. What is that? Okay, maybe a mistake. So you see the volume that's being generated, it's in exabytes, and how you store it and organize it is what it matters the most when you comes to this volume, right? And then the storage is pretty cheap compared to how much of information you are gathering and all that. So nowadays many companies are not worried on storage, and they use this storage as we use, right? So if I talk about the infrastructure architecture, right? So they don't necessarily buy these infrastructure as much as they want and they anticipate to use, but rather they use as they use. So most of these storage applications are there is a whole lot of a space where this cloud is taking away this area of work, where they provide infrastructure as much as you want and as much as you use it, right? So that's about the 2 cents in the value. Next comes the velocity, right? So velocity is like how fast the data is generating, right? Everyone in the world is using Facebook. Everyone is posting something or the other thing, right? Or the different streams of data, right? So the machines are generating data, right? The cell phones are generating data. There are different sources, and also at the different speeds of information that's coming in. That comes as a velocity here, right? So you're processing churning different sources of information. That's a velocity. So the variety is the structured, and there is a different unstructured data, right? So variety is like the structured is all about you have a defined set of tables and defined set of columns, right? And then there is some application sitting on top of this table, and then you enter some data and then falls into that database. So that's a structured data, right? And what is the unstructured data? You post a picture, you call someone, your friend, and talk like 30 minutes. That's all unstructured information, right? So that's the kind of a variety of data. You have some PDFs, you send out documents, you have words, you have JPEGs, you have different formats of information, right? That's all comes under the variety, right? How you present your information is all the variety, right? And the veracity of the data, right? What is veracity? This is something new term for you guys probably. So it's a abnormality in the data, right? So just to define this as a V's, so they named it as a, we don't use this word very often. It's abnormalities in the data, right? So let's say comparing back to my cheese company, let's say I have to make 100 grams cheese in each packet, right? And then I make this production, right? And the last piece in the product is very small. So let's say it becomes 50 grams, right? And one of this piece has cut more, and then it becomes 250 grams, right? So the veracity is the data abnormalities, right? The way from 50 until the 250, that's the abnormalities of the data, right? But the goal is to produce at 200 grams, right? So that's the abnormality. So you have to, your logic has to work on this, the median mode, how the data is distributed. That's all the cleaning of the data. You have to clean all this data. If you average it out, if you produce two products, with one with 200 and one with 100, it averages out to 150, right? So you have to identify that product which has impacted your production, and then you have to take it apart, right? So that's abnormality. So there is a lot of cases like that on a day to day in every company. You have to deal with abnormalities, right? Everywhere. So you have to define your goals, thresholds, everything, and what time and all that you have to define. So that's a veracity. So the validity, right? So what is validity is like how correct this information is, right? How accurate is there? Any kind of a validations that's going into this data? Like let's say some application enters some data which is not correct, right? They enter some address, for example, which does not exist. So it's all the validity. You have to compare and check before it gets saved into your database, because let's say Walmart is an example in US. It sends advertisements to every home in the house, and one page of print costs, let's say, like 30 cents, 50 cents, right? And then if you have to imagine, there are like about 400 to 500 million homes in the United States, and they have to send this advertisement to almost damn possible home in the US, right? So let's say if they have wrong addresses everywhere, and then they end up spending millions of dollars just by sending these advertisement papers for nothing, right? It doesn't have any use. So the validity plays a crucial role when you are submitting this data as a good data, right? And volatility, right? So it's a time dependent thing, right? So some data may be relevant only on certain times of the day, right? So let's say if you see there are some things in the Google nowadays. If you open a store, it says it's so busy now at this time, right? So it's only time dependent. It's only busy between 9 and 10, or some roads are busy only between 8 and 9, right? So it may not be same throughout the day, right? So the data should learn the volatility of the data also, right? So so these are the different characteristics you need to think as a data architect personality or understanding the data. There are different things like this to consider, right? So the next comes the data governance, right? So there is a saying from on the data side. So the saying is like this, right? So there are known knowns and known unknowns, but we also have unknown unknowns, right? I repeat, there are known knowns and known unknowns, but we also have unknown unknowns, right? So what it means, this is some real way what threats to the privacy and data security looks like, right? So if you don't have the governance of the data, right, uh, and you are not able to identify that unknown unknowns, right? There are a lot of unknown unknowns in the world, right? Everyone thinks I know everything. It's not true, right? I know everything in and out of my company. It's not true, right? Because there are a lot of aspects which are unknown unknowns. Nobody has even discussed about those topics yet, right? And there is a high chances that data can show you that. So more the models, more the application logic you put in, you get new scenarios that you have to analyze on data, right? So it's important like how each of these companies management governs this data very well, right? So if you don't have a governance on this data, there is a high chances of security threat and attacks on this company, right? So you have to have right things in place to protect this data. So the system seems to be very inconsistent sometimes, right? So why is it like that? So if you don't have a governance on the data, like and somebody changes this data without knowledge of other members in the company, then you cannot dictate or define a rule based on this data, right? We can always make these things better, right? So if you don't manage and govern these things properly, it can break, or data is not accurate, or data will not come in time for the decisions, right? And somebody did something else which we didn't expect. So there should be a governance, right? So that's why we do a lot of audits, data audits, and that controls and governs this data, right? So to govern this data, right, you need to think of a lot of aspects of it, right? How these data across different applications and systems tie together, right? So the finance may have a different way of looking at the data. The supply chain may have a different way of looking at data, right? You should understand how these systems tie together, right? The profit and loss, the general ledger, balance sheet, how all these are tying together one another. If you don't have a fair understanding of all these processes in the organization, it's hard for you to govern the data as a data person, right? So like let's say one system is updated as of today, as of this morning. Some may be updated as of yesterday, right? So there should be some governance and rules on these systems that this is well aware for the management or business people, so that they are aware that this information is as of that day, right? So they should know all of this, how consistent these things are, what are the currency translations, what are the unit conversions. Some people are talking about the cheese in pounds, some people are talking about in kgs. So you have to take care of these unit conversions and currency conversions also as part of your data governance, right? And the validations, I said, in the characteristics of V, all those V's also as a part of governance, right? It all comes as a part of governance, right? Integrity of the data, like can these numbers roll up to the next level? What is the hierarchies of this data, right? What are the sources, right? Are those actionable insights that data has provided, are they accurate? All this, is there a data duplication? How do you control the data duplication? Is the data getting worse over the day? Is your logic working on the amount of data that's coming in? So all these aspects should be governed to maintain a good one, right? And again, I said this governance is very crucial for any company, because if it's not correct and accurate, the decisions may yield to a wrong results, right? And then you can never achieve to that stage of cognitive analytics where The predictions are always wrong. You can never achieve to the next level of the data science. So that's the data that's the data governance, right? So the next thing is that I would like to little bit of touch upon the data warehouse. I think you can have plenty of information on all of these topics in the internet. You should, as your people interested on these topics, you should read through a lot of other blogs from the internet. But I'll just tell you one sentence on each of these, right? So what's the database, right? All of these four things that I mentioned here, in the back end, they're all data. They're all databases, right? How you structured the data defines what it is, right? Let's say if you organize the data in a table and row fashion, it becomes a database, and that supports some application, right? That supports some application. So when you store this data in a fashion that's easy to write the information, then it becomes a database, right? So there is a read and write on the database, right? So if any application is easy and fast to write data into the database, it becomes application database, right? But if you create a database that is easy to read and analyze the data, then it becomes a data warehouse, right? How you cluster the data, how you cardinal the data inside the database is based on what is the intended use of that database. So there could be different databases serving at different purposes, right? So data warehouse is something that is defined to best read the information, okay? And then the data mart, I'll tell you a saying from one of the person from Pentaho, is a database person. He's the owner of that Pentaho is like Dixon, I think James Dixon or someone. So this guy said the definition of data mart as a water bottle which is cleansed for drinking, right? But the data warehouse and databases are like a lake where all kinds of water come and falls into the lake, right? So all this lake water is not clean to drink, but a data mart is a subset of data from the data lake, which is ready to consume by a person or by a department in respect to the enterprise, right? So it's a departmental specific use. It's a data mart. So data lake, again, I said that covers that statement I said before covers the data lake also. It says like all sources you dump in a yard and you don't know what to use, when to use, and you just dump there, right? It accepts all formats of data, but whereas database and data warehouse, it only accepts a structured information in the form of a table, columns, and rows information, right? So that's the database and data warehouse. And data lake can accept any information that you want to store for the lateral use. Like for an example of the pizza conversation, they don't know whether that information is useful for the pizza store, but they still have all of that information, right? So something like that. So you jump. It's a kind of a it's a lake or a pond where you dump everything that you want, right? So here comes some of the real examples. I'll touch upon like 2-3 minutes on each of this topic, right? Where data helped business in my experience in the past, right? So the term before that, is there any questions so far? I'm just seeing. Please share. I'll share this. What I think this is not to me. Nice information. Please share PPT. I will share this PPT to Manasa or Murli here. They will see how it can come to you all. This PPT is not a great information because it's all something that I typed in like few slides, but you can have a better information on Google. I didn't have time to put some better slides for this. Okay, I think no questions. I think this topic is very vague and probably this has no much questions to ask. I chose something that, I don't get to answer much from you guys. Okay. So coming back to these examples, right? The capacity planning. So what is this capacity planning, right? Let's say I'll tell this example in perspective to the cheese manufacturing company I'm working for, right? So the capacity planning is something you have like 10 production lines, right? Each line produces like 1,000 pounds of cheese every day, right? And then you have to know what is the production capacity of your own company, right? So let's say they're expected to produce 1,000 pounds in each line, and then somebody produces 600 pounds, somebody produces 700 pounds of cheese on an every hour, right? Or somebody produces 1,500 pounds in an every hour, right? So this capacity planning is something that the planners from the administration office does. What is the capacity left we have, so to support the orders that we get from the customers, right? So let's say we have 10 lines, and all these 10 lines can produce 10,000 pounds of cheese, and we can only produce that much in 1 hour, right? So if you take 24 hours, we can only produce 240,000 pounds in each day, and we can only take orders up to 240,000 pounds. So that's all the planning, right? But based on the planning, you always cannot go by the book rule, right? So you always produce either more or less, right? And then it depends on how many people are working on the line. Some people come in late, some people things like that, right? So based on that, every production line produces a lot of data on that each production, right? So you have to analyze all of this data and define the thresholds for each line, that it can produce 1,100 because there are more senior people on the line, and this can only produce 800 pounds because there are less experienced people on the line. So you have to do this kind of a planning based on what is produced in the past, right? So that's the data. You're making it analyzable, and then be able to show it to the plant managers, so they define their planning according to what is shown in the past, right? So somebody is 20 years experienced in the same line doing the same cheese cutting, right? He does little faster versus the person who just joined the company doing the same job after the training, right? So that all capacity planning can be controlled and monitored through data, and it helps a lot on a day-to-day business to the production people, on the line supervisor and stuff like that, right? So the weight deviations, right? So what is a weight deviation? So every cheese that we produce is supposed to be like 100 pounds of cheese. 100 grams of cheese, let us say that. But we produce different forms of cheese, right? One is shred cheese, like sliced cheeses, like that we can put it in between the burgers, or shreds that we can put it on something else, or like a bar slices, like they want to just cut and eat it as is, right? So there are different formats and different forms of cheeses, right? So every format and form has a different thresholds, right? So I have this product for that produces 100 grams on each piece, right? And then I make 10 pieces together, form a case, and then that case is sold as is to the retail stores, right? So if it is 200 pounds, 200 grams in each case, it has to be exactly 1% more or less to 200 grams, because as per the consumer law, it cannot be lower than certain level percentage of the cheese, or it cannot be over the percentage of a cheese, right? And if you produce, the goal is to produce more than 200 always, because you don't want to produce the lesser quantity, so the customer is disappointed, right? So every machine, it goes through every slice of bar goes through a machine that calculates the weight, and there is a sensor that pushes out if it's either too low or too high, because you don't want to give away a lot of cheese if it cuts more, because you're losing that cheese. Rather, you can put it to a different uh, packaging, right? So and it collects a lot of data, right? And it will help to adjust the thresholds on the machine, right? Or we can fine tune the machine based on what the historical weights have shown us, right? So for example, we produce like millions of slices of cheeses every day, and every cheese slice has to go through the weights machines, right? And you have to analyze that data, right? It's not that easy. So you have to see which slice is, which machine is cutting more or less. That all analysis can be done only through the data. So it's very crucial to collect all this information, right? So downtime assessment, right? There are a lot of planned downtimes and unplanned downtimes in the plant, right? So you have to understand all of these downtimes. Let's say we expect to pass 4 pieces of cheese every second, but it only happens, it didn't happen a slice count on that minute, right? So that means there is a downtime in that. So we can, if you don't see that downtime data, you wouldn't know why this machine is running slow or why this running machine is not producing any cheese on that minute, right? And then there is a chance of improving the process at that minute, looking at the downtime information, right? You always have a process identified only possible through a data information available, right? If you don't have the data, it's not impossible for a human to follow these downtimes and keep track of all of that, correct? So another one is slice machine issues, right? Let's say we have a high-tech machineries in the company where you have a block of cheese, right? And then you have to cut it into smaller slices, right? So when you store this block of cheese in the warehouse, in the boxes, there are possibility to damage the corners of the cheese, right? So when you push this big block of cheese into a machine, it cuts all the corners and makes it a perfect square or a perfect cube first, right? So it will slice only just the tip of the layer, so it cuts off all the thing. So what it does, it has a sensor, it will scan the product first and see where there is a dip in the cheese or where there is a hole in the cheese or things like that. So it has to cut off all that, right? Because if it's not, the cheese is not blocked correctly, the cutting will happen wrong and there are high chances of cutting the cheese inappropriately, which we don't want to see that, correct? So we can identify that how much of cheese is getting wasted every time based on the weight, and then fine tune this cutting machines. Let's say the market is very competitive in any product, right? So there are competitors selling at a competitive prices. It's only because they are having a better operations in their departments, in their production cycle, right? So if their operations are perfect and accurate, they can reduce the cost to the maximum extent, right? So you don't want to waste the cheese on the top layer, so you have to protect the cheese more. So it all comes as a part of operations, that is performed by each of these companies. So again, data can help understand the machine slice rate, and you can always improve the slice machine giveaways from each of these lines only by data. So the customer retention strategies, right? Let's say we have thousands of customers, and then we lose one customer, we add new customers, we lose many customers, and you cannot keep track of all these customer things, right? It's only possible to track through their history of sales. Let's say one customer has, he doesn't go away all of a sudden, right? He slowly cut down the process or slowly cut down the amount of things that they buy from us, and then eventually he will cut down, right? So we have to understand the trends of customer buyings and the trends of customer visiting again and again to understand when this customer has a risk of losing, or is he there is a risk of adding up more quantities to us, adding more things from us, so that we have to improve our capacity planning. So all of these entities inside the company help each other to plan their process better every day based on what they learn in the past, right? So those are some of the examples I thought I will share with you on how the data can help, right? So I think with this explanation, I would like to conclude with these things, right? Why is the data significant, right? So the data, with this, we can always make a better informed decisions, right? And you can always have a evidence and no guessing game in the planning, because the data is definitely indisputable, right? You go with the data, you sold this much, and definitely you can sell next this much. So the planning, everything happens based on what has happened in the past, right? And then as I said, all the 5 examples that we discussed here, we are definitely finding a solution for all of these problems based on data analysis, right? Of course. So you find the right solutions for the problems. So stating a problem is also hard. So you wouldn't know the problem until you analyze something. So which is the unknown unknowns that I was talking. So you have to first analyze your data to find that unknown unknowns, and then that becomes a problem statement for you, and then your data can find a solution for that problem statement, right? So that the data is a important factor. As I said in the past, what is the most important factor is the data for any organization. That defines that. And then be strategic and back your planning, right? So what is a strategic planning? How do you go in the future, right? What products you need to sell, what products you need to scrap, all the strategic decisions. It doesn't happen in a day. It happens over the years of experience and learning within the organization what is best for them. How do you define the optimal uh, process in the company, right? That's all comes up by experience, and you make a strategic decisions, and then you have the data to back you up. So let's say it's at the stake of somebody else, right? You are a management person, but you back your strategies with your data that we provide, right? So because you're answerable for stakeholders, public who is invested into the company and all that, right? So you back your data so that it's reliable and trustable for the people who has invested into the company, and then make your decisions on that. And you should know, you will definitely know what you're doing best, and you have to keep track of all of the information that you did in the past for a lot of reasons, some financial implications, or you have to submit your tax forms at the end of the year, or for whatever the reasons, you need to keep track of all of this information, which is crucial. And then you can drive your results as you want based on historical data. You can increase your targets, you can increase uh, your your uh, your goals based on what is achieved in the past, based on the trend or predictions that your data is providing you, right? And if you don't have access to all this information, you cannot make a lot of progress. Like in the past, the store manager didn't had much of the scope, so you have all of this information available around you, so better use it to be successful in the business, right? So I think it ends to the topic that I wanted to share with you all. Uh, so I can take any questions you have from now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this wonderful session. You explained everything very patiently. So, participants, if you have any questions, please post in the chat box or in the questions tab.
I think this is very, as I said, this is something, this is just descriptive. So there might be no much questions. Somebody said it's a data mart, right? So I asked about data mart. What is that data mart? I'll touch upon something else. So you you subset your data from a big chunk of information to provide somebody's need, to help somebody's information, somebody's request, right? So what is a subset of data, right? uh, so I'm looking for a good example, right? So you have lot of cheeses produced on the production, right? But as a category manager, you only look for slice cheese, not for shred cheese or anything else, right? How do you subset this data from the big information, right? The whole lot of information. So if you read a data from the database which has million records, it is slow. But if you read a record from the database which is having only information related to slice of information, then the read is faster, right? So you subset this read information from the big chunk of data into a smaller set. So that's a subset. So that becomes a data mart, and then you can export it or use it for a faster retrieval for that request. So that's a data mart. State of the art research projects and data. So state of the art research projects on data. Actually, it's all based on the industry that you are in. I'm in the cheese industry, so I'm in the consumer goods industry. So I would take some pain points in any company. You wouldn't know what the pain points are unless you have the industry experience. So, for example, in my case, I have seen a lot of study in the last 2 years how to cut a cheese with a minimal wastage, right? So and it is not related to our data. It's the data is not more of a IT concern, it's more of a business concern, right? Because that's where the definition of the business comes, definition of the goal comes from. What's the goal of the business, right? So your project should help the goal of the business, then only you call yourself as your entity. And of course the data architecture is a big entity of your organization. So you should you should follow your pain point of your organization to start a research on that pain. So you start collecting the data, you have to visualize, you have to take pictures of the block. So if you have seen this how this machine learning and deep learning things happen, they'll take pictures of a block of cheese before sending it into the slice machine, and then they will analyze if the block is in this shape, this much of cheese is produced, right? If the block is in this shape, it produced this much of cheese, right? So you learn this data with hundreds of scannings of the cheese blocks, right? And then you this is all a part of the research, how to improve your accuracy of the cutting of the cheese, right? So for every 100 grams of cheese, you lose, let's say, 5% of cheese. So you're losing 5% of the profit to the company, right? So because the cheese is only sold at 1% or 2% of profit, so you want to keep your wastages at the minimal, right? So that you don't lose that profit that you can make out of the process. So then it's not a profitable business. Then of course you're out of the market. So you're not in the game anymore. So every improvement on the process will definitely add a value to the cent of the dollar saving. So you can pick any of that as a project. Difference between IoT and AI, right? The IoT is something, it's a data produced by the sensors and machines, is an IoT information, right? And AI is how you use it. Like there is a millions of records produced by these machines, and it's saved somewhere in the form of unstructured fashion. And then your AI is something, it's a technology or a tool that you access this information that is stored and gathered via IoT, and be able to produce some usable information for the management to take the decisions. That's AI. So I think that's it. I have no further questions here. One last thing I would say to you all, because I know most of you are in search of jobs. So I have some one philosophical thing to say for you all. So be in the right group, right? If you want, let's say, if a rain drops on a hot road, right, it evaporates in the second, right? If it falls on the leaf, it stays forever, right? If it falls, it looks like the pearl on the leaf, right? So it all matters on where you are and who you are surrounded by with your friends, and always be in the circle of friends where you have always learning motive and keep improving your skills on. So the circle where you belong defines your future. So be in the right circle, do your best. Everyone will have great careers ahead. So all the best. And Mansa, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for accepting our request and conducting this webinar on significance of data to an enterprise. Uh, so I hope everyone has enjoyed the session. I'm sending the feedback link in the chat box. Please check once.
Yeah, if you can share me that feedback, that would be great. So I can keep it for my reference.
Yeah, sure, sir. I will share it with you as well. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this.
Okay. Good
Uh,
luck to you all, and signing off for now.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Please send the presentation, sir.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, sir.